So then I was like, the problem with cooking 16 pounds of potatoes every week is that I eat about a pound and a half every day.
Is that so?
So, yeah. Anyways, welcome, everybody. This is the Nutrient Health Project podcast. My name, as always, is Andrew Frisch. This is my beautiful wife,
Holly Frisch.
Holly Frisch. So, and we are here to bring you some health and fitness and nutrition information to try to simplify things so you can live your best life, feel great, look good naked, get rid of all the problems. Just make everything just hunky-dory, amazingly kick-ass. Mm-hmm. So, worst intro ever, but here we are. So today is episode number 23. This is the second in our health and hormones series. Last week, episode 22, we obviously did the first episode of the health and hormone series, and we covered testosterone and estrogen. I feel like you're like almost off camera. Let me pan that over a little bit. There we go. So as I mentioned, cameras, guys, we have like 13 times more listeners than we do viewers. So if you ever want to watch us sit in our living room and talk about this stuff with the beautiful bookshelves behind me, hop on YouTube and search Andy Frisch, and you'll find the Nutrient Health Project podcast videos on YouTube. But so last week we did episode 22 of the health and hormone series. Well, episode 22, number 1 of the health and hormone series. That was over testosterone and estrogen. Today we are doing thyroid, and next week we will be doing insulin and cortisol. But before we get started, as always,
if you want to leave us a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, we would greatly appreciate it.
Yep, and I'll like full disclosure, I was getting on there. So number 1, some of y'all who are listening, and you know who you are, if you haven't gone to give a review, I'm coming for you. I'm going to show up on your front door, and we're going to do burpees for every episode that you've listened to and you haven't given a review of. We're doing 10 burpees. So doing the reviews is super easy, guys. Like if it's on Spotify, well, at least if it's on Spotify, it's super easy. It's basically you go to Spotify, you go to the Nutrient Health Project podcast, go to our page on Spotify, and if you scroll like all the way to like the top of the most recent episodes, you'll see like a little thing there that says like ratings or review or whatever. Just give us a 5 stars if you think we're worth that 5 stars. If you don't, I'll probably add more burpees to that total. I've tried to figure out how to do it on Apple Podcasts, and like I guess
can't figure it out.
Yeah, I'm Apple Podcast
illiterate.
Yeah, illiterate. So I know you can do it though, and we greatly appreciate those 5-star reviews. So with all of that, as always, if you have questions on today's episode or questions that you just want us to answer in general, email those to NutrientPodcast at gmail.com. Again, NutrientPodcast at gmail.com. With that, without any further ado, let's get into it. Episode 23, Health and Hormone Series, Thyroid. So we're going to cover, similar to the structure of last week's episode on the testosterone and estrogen episode, we're going to cover basically like 4 areas in terms of your thyroid. So Holly, what are those first 2?
So symptoms of high or low thyroid, and then number 2, potential causes for those levels.
Yep, and in addition to that, so in addition to the symptoms and potential causes, we're also going to cover kind of like what lifestyle factors may be leading to, it's usually low thyroid is the issue. Not always. People do have hyperthyroidism, but more often than not, at least what we deal with is people who are trying to lose weight or trying to feel better, and it's usually a sluggish thyroid that's the problem. But we will like kind of talk about hyperthyroidism as well, just briefly. But we're going to talk about kind of what lifestyle factors will potentially lead to that, or what things we can address to improve sluggish thyroid. And we're also I do not need to be drinking carbonated beverages. Yeah, I was almost going to do a plug for them, but anyways, you got it in my head to do a plug for them, so I'm thinking about doing it. Focus. Number 1, symptoms of high or low thyroid. Number 2, potential causes for those levels. Number 3, what lifestyle factors can you address to improve those? And then number 4, supplements to assist. And we're going to talk both vitamins and minerals that are critical for thyroid health. And then we're also going to talk some super secret stuff to kind of improve overall thyroid health. So
Alrighty. So, thyroid. I'm supposed to ask how can someone know if their thyroids are out of whack, but I think this is something that I've obviously dealt with
Yep.
for a while now.
You were dealing with that when before we even got together, when you were starting to train.
Yeah.
So, expound on your experience, my dear.
So, I was going through a time when I was having kind of a lot going on, so like it's kind of blurry back then a little bit, but because I had my gallbladder out around this time as well. But I think I was like around 16 or so, and I was just always tired. And I didn't have a lot of energy. I was always someone who could take like a 2-hour nap and then still have no problem going right to sleep. Sleep for like 8 hours and then get back up, do it again. And then I don't even know why I ended up going for, I guess because of that, I ended up going for an ultrasound on my thyroid. And I was told that I have, they called it a goiter, and then they also said like 5 nodules, which I guess nodules make up a goiter. And so I had those on there, and they didn't really tell me anything about it other than, it's just, you just need to watch it, get an ultrasound done, every year and just keep check on it. And then they had me go to an endocrinologist. And he put me on, I think it was Synthroid.
Yep.
And
we're going to talk about that.
Yeah. I took it for a little bit, but didn't feel any different. So I was like, why am I on this?
We're going to talk about that.
So I stopped taking it. And then fast forward to moving to Nashville, and I met Andy, and he helped me lose, my 90-something pounds. And I went back to the doctor, and they told me I had hyperthyroidism now.
Yep.
Which I was like, okay. And they didn't really say what to do other than just, keep.
Did they do blood work that time? Like when they told you had hyper?
Probably.
Okay.
It's kind of like blurry.
Yeah.
And they just, again, keep a check on it with an ultrasound.
Sure.
And so I did that. It was still the same. And then, when was it? Like, you and me went back and it was gone.
Yeah, it was early 2020, because remember we had to wear a mask going into the office. So we went back in 2020 because I wanted to get an ultrasound done. After you told me about the goiters, or the nodules, I was always worried about like potentially thyroid cancer.
Right.
So we went back and got the ultrasound done, and the nodules were
gone. And this was after, he's helped me get all of the supplements needed to have a healthy thyroid. And so we went back, and they, were like, there's nothing, it's gone. And I was like, okay, great. And then still kind of dealing with some symptoms, not sure if it's my thyroid. I think all my levels come back normal, but I'm always cold. Which I know a lot of time is related to your thyroid, and still have issues with some tiredness. So
yeah, and you're like, that's all kind of outside the scope of this episode, but like you are not necessarily like a perfect storm kind of client, but it's definitely, I mean, I've even run your blood labs past like the people that are mentoring me, and they're just kind of like they're not 100% sure, and like the things that they're suggesting I've already tried, as far as like giving you a low carb, see if it's like a glucose issue, or it very well may still be like a continuing thyroid thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that's stuff that I'm still trying to pinpoint and figure out. The thyroid's obviously gotten better. The weight loss isn't a problem, so I don't necessarily know that it's hypothyroidism.
Right.
But I do think it's, again, outside of the scope of this episode, but I think it's a gut health thing. So, and that's why we're tracking like your bloating after meals, your sleepiness after a meal.
Right.
So we will get to the bottom of that. But so Holly gave a lot of good information there. Essentially, when it comes to your thyroid, we're trying to look for there, and this is again ties back to last week's episode. There are 2 ways to know, really simply, if in today's episode, if your thyroid is out of whack, and that would be symptoms like Holly was saying, kind of cold, sluggish, and we'll talk more about the symptoms here in a bit. But there are other symptoms to look at. So symptoms can give clues, but also blood work for lab markers that actually give you, an actual snapshot. Like symptoms can kind of give you clues, like I think this might be going on, and then you get the blood work done, and that's a much clearer kind of picture. You can get a better idea of what's actually going on inside of your body instead of just kind of like speculating and feeling the biofeedback of what's going on. So
what are some other symptoms someone could be dealing with?
So before we get into the symptoms, I think it's important to kind of do a quick thyroid panel primer. And I'm going to, again, make this kind of surface level. We're not going to get really deep, but these terms are going to come up a couple different times throughout the podcast. So I want to make sure that we're covering them. So, and then we'll cover symptoms. So some of these might be familiar. If you've done any kind of a thyroid panel, if you've heard of someone doing a thyroid panel, you've probably heard some of these, and some of these may not be familiar. But so just the main, there's I think 6 here altogether that we're going to cover. So TSH, which is thyroid stimulating hormone, that is basically coming from the pituitary. It's released by the pituitary, and then it as the name confers, right? Thyroid stimulating hormone. It comes from pituitary to the thyroid, and it's trying to stimulate the thyroid to do work, to do its activities. You got T4, which is like the reserve thyroid hormone. So, and then T3, which is the active thyroid hormone. I kind of have the mental image of like T4 being like a grenade with the pin in. It's not really going to do anything. And then when you pull the pin out, now it's active and it's live and it's actually going to do something. So when you're getting T3 done, you can get, the lab markers, you can get total T3, but you can also get free T3. Free is ideally what you want, because when you measure free T3, that's like actually what's available by the body to use. So total T3 gives you a picture, but free T3 is like really, I think, kind of more accurate in terms of like what your body is going to be able to use. So TSH, T4, T3, reverse T3 is basically, it's like the evil doppelganger to regular T3. So real quick in the chain of command, what happens? TSH comes from the pituitary, hits your thyroid, and in an ideal healthy person, the thyroid will then produce T4, and T4 is basically just a tyrosine, which is an amino acid. It's a tyrosine molecule with 4 iodine molecules attached to it. Then you have an enzyme that comes in and it cleaves off one of those iodine molecules to make it go from T4 to T3, right? It goes from 4 iodine molecules to 3 iodine molecules. T3 is that active thyroid hormone, and it will dock every single cell in your body has receptors for T3. So it's like a system-wide thing, and we'll get into like how, again, hypothyroidism, hyperthyroidism affects you all over the place, all across the body. But reverse T3, like I said, is kind of that evil doppelganger, and what'll happen is reverse T3 strongly resembles like free actual T3, so much so that like at the cellular level, reverse T3 can bind with T3 receptors and stop, like the good guys, the actual T3, stop it from binding. So it can like, you might have a test that says like, well, your TSH is good, your T4 is good, but if you're not getting free and reverse T3 measured, then you don't know, like, are you actually converting to free T3 or reverse T3? Because if you're converting to way more reverse T3, then it's like it's null and void, and those T3 receptors are being filled, but they're not getting the active T3. So does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So T3, your body can shunt the T4 that's converted to reverse T3. Typically is going to do it in times of stress, which is one of the things that might still be going on with you right now, right? We haven't gotten, did we get reverse T3? No, we didn't get reverse T3, did we? I don't think we got that measured. I have to look at it again. But in times of stress, your body will actually shunt like T4 instead of to free T3, what you need, it'll shunt it to reverse T3. So stress being, again, the usual culprits that we talk about, right? Lack of sleep, it being in too low of a calorie deficit for too long, being like overtrained, stressed out at work, and you even said, I don't know if you caught it, like you had a lot going on
Right.
around that time with the gallbladder and all that. So, and I know like your family didn't eat the healthiest, right? And I know you probably had a lot of stress going on just in the family.
Yeah.
So, so that is like stress can definitely be kind of a determining factor in terms of your body not taking T4 to T3, but instead taking T4 to reverse T3. So, T3 can also be elevated, like if you have like infections or chronic inflammation or kind of other illnesses. And it makes sense if you think about it, because if the body is getting signals of stressed all the time, no matter what the stress is, or chronic inflammation or infection or other illnesses, it like it's a protective mechanism, right? It's like adaptive physiology. So it's trying to protect itself by taking some of that T4, and instead of saying like, hey, let's make it to where the metabolism is healthy and everything is running full steam ahead, we need to slow some things down here because whatever reason energy is not abundant, or we're under more stress, or we have an infection. So it's actually like a protective mechanism. And I think a lot of people might potentially be having more reverse T3 because they're doing too much or too stressed out. So, two more markers. So again, TSH, T4, free T3, reverse T3. We have TPO-AB, which is thyroid peroxidase antibodies. So, and this is getting into the weeds a little bit, but TPO-AB would be measured. It basically measures if the body is producing antibodies to thyroid peroxidase. This is the most important test to diagnose if you have Hashimoto's. So, yeah, I mean, it is what it is right there. So you can also get TGAB, which is thyroglobulin antibodies. It's just another test to see if the immune system is producing antibodies to your thyroglobulin. But it's also another way that they can use to test if you have Hashimoto's, but it's less sensitive than the TPO-AB, the thyroid peroxidase antibodies. So,
Okay, so those are the lab markers. But what would symptoms be of someone who has hyperthyroidism or Hashimoto's?
So, did I miss anything in there? No, symptoms, right? Yeah. So I was like, I had to look at my notes. I feel like I skipped something. So, hypo, hyper, and Hashimoto. So hypothyroidism, like low thyroid, right? So if you have hypothyroidism or low thyroid hormone production, here are some of the kind of the more common symptoms that you would potentially deal with. So sensitivity to cold or feeling cold, which that's
all the time.
Yeah. You have a little bit of, this is one thing that makes me think it might be Hashimoto's, and if it is, then it's an autoimmune issue and we need to go down that route. But you're not just sensitive to cold, like your temperature regulation is way out of whack.
Right, like I can be inside somewhere where there's like air conditioning and be freezing and have a jacket on, and like the moment we get outside and it's hot outside, like I have to take my coat off immediately, like I'm burning up air conditioning in the car.
Yep.
Because it's just like it's so hot I can't stand it. Like,
yep. And we
don't think it's normal.
Right, and we've done. I mean, I've commented on that before, where it's like, we're in the store, you got your jacket on because you're freezing, just in like Kroger, walking around getting groceries. We get to the car and you take your coat. You can't get your coat off fast enough, and you're turning on the AC.
Right.
It's just like you were just cold. Like what the hell?
Right.
So I think that with you, that might be more of a Hashimoto's thing, which is definitely a possibility. So.
No.
But if we're talking just hypothyroidism, it's going to be cold. Like you're not going to necessarily have a sensitivity to hot. If you have hypothyroidism, you're going to have a sensitivity to cold, or you're going to feel cold. On that same vein, you're going to be like you're going to feel lethargy in both like in energy and in digestion. So like that lethargic digestion would basically cause constipation, right? Just sluggish digestion. If you have lethargic energy, think about that. It's going to be brain fog or just kind of like general fatigue. Hypothyroidism is also a big contributing factor to a resistance to weight loss. So that's, again, a really common one that we see really often, especially with some of the consulting work I do. It's really common to see people who have kind of down-regulated thyroid. And a lot of times that's potentially because the people have been on kind of low-calorie, low-carb diets for a really long period of time. Your body needs carbohydrates to have that T4 to T3, like healthy T4 to T3, the free T3 conversion. So in the absence of carbohydrates, cortisol can creep up, and when cortisol creeps up, that T4 to free T3 conversion will start going the reverse T3 way. So weight loss, resistance to weight loss rather, is a really common one with hypothyroidism. Another one, interrupted sleep patterns. So again, it's everything is running sluggish. Your sleep quality is going to drop. And then some other ones like hair loss is a common one. Brittle nails is a really common one. I tend to think of I love analogies. If you listen to the podcast at all, you know I like analogies and metaphors. They just help kind of get more complex things across in a simpler way. And I like the pacemaker analogy when it comes to your thyroid. So your thyroid is your pacemaker or your thermostat, if you want to do that. It's basically like the governing thing on how fast or slow everything is running through your body. So like I just said, all of that stuff, right? Like sensitivity to cold, like metabolism might be running a little sluggish. Lethargy and energy and digestion, because those things are running a little bit sluggish, right? Resistance to weight loss, because your metabolism is kind of sluggish. So if you understand that your thyroid is kind of the pacemaker or the thermostat for the whole body, then you can think of how like hypothyroidism would be slower, sluggish, colder, and hyperthyroidism is like the exact opposite. So now you're revving up the RPMs, and now the temperature is a lot hotter. So now you have like an abundance of energy. Like you know, it's the person who like can't sit still. Their thyroid is just chugging along. They can't keep weight on. So like it's again that pacemaker thing is like if everything is just running at 100 miles per hour, like it's hard for that person to keep weight on. So that's the person who like in a gym sense they just can't seem to build muscle and they're super lean. Like it potentially would be a hyperthyroidism thing. I mean, there's obviously a million other things, other variables that could be causing it, but that's one thing to look at. Another kind of common side effect with hyperthyroidism is that the eyes can actually kind of like bulge out. So if you someone that's got like, I don't know, like a
bug eyes.
Yeah, I was thinking like a pug, like mental image of a bug. Like, but I mean that's a side effect of having hyperthyroidism. So and then Hashimoto's I've kind of mentioned, but like Hashimoto symptoms can kind of mirror hypothyroidism. So, but I think that in my experience, not personal experience, but professional experience, that Hashimoto's, the temperature thing can kind of be like cold and hot, like a temperature, inability to regulate temperature.
Right.
So
like in the last episode, you mentioned the difference between functional ranges and standard reference ranges.
I sure did.
Maybe we should do a refresher for anyone new listening.
Yep, absolutely. So what she's talking about is on your labs, on your lab markers, on your blood panels, your serum tests, whatever, you will see like reference ranges, standard reference ranges. And those standard reference ranges are based on kind of the average American, right? Whereas functional ranges are based on healthy individuals. So most of the people, like I said last week, most of the people that we're working with want to be healthy, not standard. So,
well, even in episode 17, we talked about blood sugar. You mentioned, like, what was it, 88% are not metabolically healthy?
Yep. There's like only 12% of Americans are metabolically healthy. So reference ranges on your typical blood panel, when those come back, those are comparing yourself to the, 100%, but like 88% of that 100% are not healthy. So, so yes, like spot on with that. The functional ranges that so going to a functional doctor, they might have these functional ranges. If you're going to like any kind of like primary care physician, general practitioner, they're going to be using like the standard Western reference ranges. Say that 5 times fast. Here we're going to the tongue twisters again. But so the functional ranges are not as wide ranging since they're based on like what's actually healthy rather than what's standard. So I think I mentioned this last episode, but like it's really common for like some of them, like the sodiums and potassiums, there's not much difference between functional and Western ranges. The optimal ranges and like the standard ranges. I get talking too fast for my mouth to keep up. Other things like inflammation, blood sugar, those are like wildly different between what's optimal and what's typical American, because typical American has a lot of inflammation going on, has like blood sugar, again, 88% of us like blood sugar issues going on, right? So for the thyroid specifically, the TSH, the T4, and the T3 ranges are a little bit tighter on the functional range versus the Western standard ranges. But it's really like the TPO and the TG, the antibody scores that I mentioned earlier. Because again, antibodies are like your immune system creates antibodies to attack a thing. And if you're healthy, your immune system shouldn't be attacking itself. It shouldn't be attacking your body, right? So if someone is not healthy and they have a lot of inflammation or a lot of stress going on, and they're kind of leaning towards into that Hashimoto's, autoimmune issues, those TPO and TG antibody scores are going to be like, on a much broader scale than they would like with a functional, like healthy level. So does that make sense?
Yeah. So how might a doctor treat those labs?
Well, so it depends on what kind of doctor we're talking about. But if we're talking like just again like a general, primary care physician or just general practitioner, typically what they're going to do is they're going to see that TSH is high. This is like, I've heard this like dozens and dozens and dozens of times by now. So they'll see your TSH is high, which means your thyroid stimulating hormone is high, which is basically saying like your pituitary is knocking on the front door of your thyroid, like you're like, come on, time to go to work, like time to get going, and the thyroid for whatever reason is not responding. So, and I will dollars to donuts. I will bet that's I'm having such a hard time talking today. We need to not do a 3-hour workout before we do the podcast.
No.
But dollars to donuts, I will bet that's the score that you got because you said they put you on Synthroid.
Yeah.
So, right?
Yeah.
So, typically what'll happen is they'll see that TSH is high, and we'll talk kind of about lifestyle factors, but also like what you could do as far as getting scores when you go to have, like if you listen to this episode and you're like, okay, I want to go get my thyroid tested and I want to have a thyroid panel done. You need to specifically ask for some of those scores, and I'll mention them again at the end, because typically all they're going to do is like TSH. You might get like T4, you might get like total T3, but you need to really specifically ask for those other ones to get a full picture if you think something else is going on. Because they'll see that TSH number, see it's elevated, and some doctors will only prescribe something to kind of get that number down. In other words, they're treating the lab, they're not treating the patient. So they're going to give you whatever they need to give you to get that TSH number down, but they're not like super concerned with like overall thyroid health, because again, they're just doing kind of what they've been told to do, what they've been taught to do. So they'll prescribe something like Synthroid. You also might see it as levothyroxine, which is by itself just T4. They also might prescribe a combo of T4 and T3, like NutrientPodcast or Armor Thyroid. Those are going to come with, like I said, T4 and T3. The problem with something just being T4, kind of jumping ahead here a little bit, but like if they're just giving you T4 to get that TSH number down, that's not going to address any possible conversion issues like I talked about with free T3 or reverse T3. So like, let's say your TSH is high and your reverse T3 is high, but you don't know it because you didn't get it tested. The doctor's going to give you T4, which will help the TSH number go down, but it's not doing anything to help with T3. And that ultimately is like, if you have hypothyroidism, it's because your T3 is not where it should be. So, well, I mean, there's more to it than that, but like the problem with all of the sluggishness and lethargy comes because your T3 levels are not, the free T3 is not binding to the receptors. It's most likely either not being produced or it's the reverse T3 that's binding. So, there are other problems that go in hand with that though. So it's not just the T4 alone. You could also, like, the doctor may give you the prescription, but maybe the dosages are not correct. So that could be a problem. Either it's too high or too low. Another big thing is, and I don't know, like I've worked with some people, like the doctors don't even bring this up, but micronutrients still need to be addressed and they still need to be added to the plan. So micronutrients, just vitamins and minerals, right? There's another, again, analogies. There's another analogy I like called, well, it's not called anything, but it's like the dried well analogy. So if you, and this goes even hand in hand with us talking about testosterone and estrogen last week, or thyroids today, if you're giving your body something to try to get that, organ or gland pumping out more of that hormone, but you're not giving it the building blocks for that hormone, it's kind of like you're pumping the handle to a well that's dry. And you can pump and pump and pump, and all you're going to do is like eventually break the handle, right? You're going to break that pump. So with the thyroid, and we'll get into the micronutrients, but with the thyroid, like just giving someone T4 or even just T4 and T3 isn't necessarily going to remedy the problem.
So before we get to the macronutrients, what lifestyle factors should people look to correct?
So this is going to be kind of a common list. It's going to be a recurring theme, and this is, like I said, it's the ones that you'll hear us cover repeatedly. So stress management in all of its forms, because again, like cortisol management is important if you're trying to minimize kind of like reverse T3 production. So stress management, meaning, get a consistent sleep schedule, make sure you're either eating adequate calories or not in such a big deficit, because if you're, and we've talked about this in previous episodes, having like a 500 calorie deficit, okay, cool. But like if you start getting to like 1,000 calorie deficit, 1,200, 1,500 calorie deficit, there are some people I've worked with, they're like 2,000 calorie deficits. You're like, I love it when Google, Google. I don't know if you guys could hear that, but Google in the kitchen kicked in. I'm trying to like think like what the hell did I say to make it kick in? What was I talking about? Stress?
Yes. Being too big of a calorie deficit.
Thank you. So if you're in too big of a calorie deficit, like Google just threw me way off base with that. If you're in too big of a calorie deficit, then that's a massive stressor, and that's going to send off all kinds of alarms in the body. So, and that's like a perfect reason for the body to say like, hey, we need to make this T4 into reverse T3, not free T3. So consistent sleep schedule, just reducing like work stress, lifestyle stress, making sure you're not in too big of a calorie deficit, make sure you're not overtrained. Maybe are you recovering? Are you working out hard? Okay, cool. But are you stretching and doing like some recovery based training too? Getting more sunlight, improving your blood sugar levels, again, improving your physical activity. Like, resistance training is great. It's easy to overdo the cardio. I mean, it's easy to overdo the resistance training too, but I feel like most people, when it comes to like wanting to lose weight, they do too much cardio and not enough training, not enough resistance training. But just overall, like working on lowering your inflammation in the body. Like if you're always hurting, if you're always sore from a workout, which I mean, I've spent like 20 years in that state.
Right.
That's not great. Like you should do some things to start to mitigate some of that inflammation. We need to do an inflammation episode because there's a shit ton of supplements I can talk about on that.
I also get in the mindset of like, it's only a great workout if I'm sore, and the feeling of being sore feels great, but it's not always true.
Right. And I mean, the soreness is nice, but again, it's like one of those, like hell, one of my clients just recently kind of called me out on it. I was Greg, like this is last weekend, we did like a really hard upper body pull workout, I think Saturday. And then Sunday I went in and I was toying around with those Zercher Good Morning. So like a Zercher Good Morning is like, if you can picture someone standing in a squat rack, you put the barbell like in the crook of your elbow. So like you bring your hands out in front of you and you put the barbell in like the crook of your elbow. So you're holding it up in front of you. Well, you're holding it with your arms up in front of you, and then doing a good morning, which is like you're kind of like bending over down to the ground. I did those for the first time, like, or second time, I think maybe. Long story short, Monday morning, like my back was just demolished, and like I mean, it's hard for me to get my back sore, but it was like just toast. And I was complaining about how sore I was, and Greg asked, he was like, is it good to get your back that sore? And I was like, well, fuck no. Technically, no, it's not, but sometimes we go a little overboard. So, I mean, how we just said that we did like a 2.5 hour workout this morning. So,
get into it.
Yeah. But yeah, it is. It's super easy. And I know there are other people listening to this that can identify as far as like, you've got to just kill it in the workout. And it's like, well, no, you don't always have to kill it in the workout. And really the only reason I give myself a pass on killing it in the workout more often than not killing it in the workout is because I'm really, really, really good about recovery work.
Right.
Like
You are
I'm,
really good about that.
I stretch. Like if I'm
All day long.
Yep. If I'm reading a book, if I'm typing up things on the internet, if I'm doing consulting calls or coaching calls, like I'm stretching, massaging, rolling. Like I should be the world's most limber man at this point, but really I'm just trying to mitigate the soreness. So working on lowering the inflammation, and then like one final one when it comes to just overall health, but even like will tie into your thyroid health is improving your gut health. So we should do an episode on gut health too. We should do a series on gut health.
Add it.
We should do a series on inflammation and a series on gut health.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So I know like stress management has been huge for me. But let's talk about micronutrients. I think I can actually cover some of them.
Yeah, I was gonna say
if I can.
At this point, like with as much as I've talked about it and drummed it into your head.
Yeah.
So
So like magnesium, B12, and zinc are important for production of TSH.
yep.
I know selenium from experience helps with T4 to T3 conversion. And then iodine is critical for T4 creation.
Correct.
Did I miss anything?
No, with the T4 creation, like vitamin C and vitamin B2 are also important for that. But yes, okay. Iodine, like I said, if you the T4 and T3 molecule, T4 is a tyrosine with 4, hence the 4 iodine molecules, and then T3 is a tyrosine with hence 3 iodine molecules. So iodine is critical to both of those. And like you said, selenium helps with conversion of T4 to T3. And then, yeah, so vitamin C, vitamin B2, vitamin B6. These are all like guys, just core supplements that you should be taking. Vitamin C, a B complex, magnesium, zinc probably doesn't hurt unless you're getting it through food. It's not hard to get zinc through food. And vitamin D, if I didn't already say that. Like those, I would say like C, D, a B complex, magnesium, and then if you're not getting like much red meat, I think oysters have zinc too. If you're not getting it through food, then add some zinc in. But yeah, so B6 is important for the proper use of iodine, and then vitamins D and vitamin A are also important for like kind of healthy receptors when it comes to thyroid hormones. So
okay, so bring it home.
Yep.
What's the super secret supplements you mentioned?
Super secret sauce supplements coming at you. So just like last week's testosterone and estrogen episode, these are not necessarily essential to your body, but they may offer some added benefit. So here we go. So hyperthyroidism, and a lot of those the micronutrients, the vitamins and minerals that we just mentioned, those are going to help like more with hypothyroidism. But hyperthyroidism, these supplements may help. I think I've got a total of 4 as far as hyperthyroidism.
Laughing at the first one.
So, why?
Bugleweed.
Bugleweed.
How I would say it.
Bugleweed.
Bugleweed.
Sounds like something out of Harry Potter. Bugleweed.
It does.
Bugleweed and motherwort. So yeah, no. So but bugleweed and motherwort both prevent T4 to T3 conversion and can block antibodies from attaching to the thyroid gland. So again, if you have hyperthyroidism, like you're trying to slow things down, that would be a good thing. Alcar, you'll hear me talk about this. You've heard me talk about it in previous episodes. You hear me talk about it again because it's almost kind of like a daily driver for me. But Alcar is acetyl L-carnitine. So that helps because when a large amount of T3 is in the bloodstream, Alcar can actually prevent T3 from entering the cells. So I take it on a daily basis or almost everyday basis because it also helps like boost brain energy, brain clarity. So I definitely notice it when I take it in the morning. Lemon balm is a natural, plant extract. It's an antiviral, and it can also help fight off autoimmune attacks on the thyroid. Lemon balm also inhibits TSH from attaching to the thyroid receptors and prevents antibodies from attacking the thyroid.
I didn't know that. Yep. I just take it at night to help us sleep.
Yeah. So sometimes you don't get lemon balm very often. I don't think it's in. I have to look if it's in that Nootropics Depot sleep stack like pill that we bought. But yeah, I'm not sure.
When I take it, like I'm out.
Yeah, I mean lemon balm is powerful. Like lemon balm, even like lemon balm tea, like that shit'll knock you out. Lemon balm is the real deal, son. The last one on hyperthyroidism is CoQ10. So this is kind of a loose correlation, but like hyperthyroidism has been connected with low levels of CoQ10. So supplementing CoQ10 is loosely connected to lowering thyroid production. Again, that's not a causation thing. It's like that might help. So yeah. Hypothyroidism, so low thyroidism. These are ashwagandha is going to be a really good one for this because ashwagandha normalizes T4 production, stimulates T3 production, and because ashwagandha is really, really good at like helping with stress management, it supports HPA and HPT axes, and the dose is going to kind of depend on like what type of ashwagandha you get. But so it's funny, like I don't know if you, the two kids that when we were lifting last night and I was using one of the cable machines and the two kids came over and like just grabbed both of them. I was like, are you guys using both of them? And they were like, yeah. I was like, okay, never fucking mind. I was using that, but it's all good.
Yeah. You're nicer than me.
Yeah. But like, I don't know if you heard them or not, but I heard them talking about ashwagandha.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I wanted to be like, oh, like, and just like kind of butt in and offer some advice, but unsolicited advice is the worst kind of advice, so I didn't say anything. But so ashwagandha is a regular in the Fresh household because, again, excuse me, like we have a couple different kinds. We have KSM 66, which is just a specific type of ashwagandha, and then we also have Sensoril. So yeah, I feel like I've talked about these in a past episode. Yeah, I feel like I've gone over this before. But KSM 66 is kind of more energizing. I will take the KSM ashwagandha, the KSM 66 ashwagandha, if I did not sleep very well, because it almost like crushes any kind of sleep deprivation and just makes me feel like happy and balanced. She'll get ashwagandha a couple times throughout the week just to help with stress because she has a real stressful job. The Sensoril is great for like going to sleep, help with like relaxing into sleep, getting good quality deep sleep. So ashwagandha is a great one if it comes to hypothyroidism. Forskolin, if you remember from last week's episode, Forskolin also helps with low testosterone, but Forskolin can also increase the production and release of thyroid hormones. Selenium, this is on this list because even though it's a micronutrient and we just talked about it a little bit ago, again, like it's used in the kind of conversion from T4 to T3, selenium, I wanted to mention this because like you can get it in supplemental form, but it's also like it can be obtained quite easily with Brazil nuts. Just a few every day. Like we'll typically measure out like, I don't know, 5 to 9 grams of Brazil nuts, which usually equates to like anywhere between 2. I mean, Brazil nuts vary in size, right? Like, but you might like, it might be 2, it might be like 4 or like 5 really small ones. But just a few Brazil nuts every day will get you your selenium. If you're not a fan of Brazil nuts, and you don't, or maybe you're just avoiding nuts and seeds for like an autoimmune issue or something, then the best supplemental form would be selenomethionine, and you can get that from pretty much anywhere you would obtain supplements. So, and then finally, thyroid glandulars might be used if TSH is above 2.0, and then obviously you'd have to look at your lab markers to know this. But if your TSH is above 2.0, and free T3 and free T4 are both low, then thyroid glandulars might be kind of what you need. Little kind of note on that. So you would only really want to use like whole gland thyroid powder from non-GMO pasture-fed either cows or pigs. So I don't have a lot of experience with the thyroid glandulars, but I do know that they have a track record for being effective if nothing else has done it. So,
all right. So anything else on thyroid?
Yes. And like I just really seriously, I want to make a plea to everyone listening to get regular blood work done. Like reason being, it's super common for us to work with someone who is like over the age of 35, who fits this profile of like chronic dieter, chronic exerciser. They're eating clean, they're trying to lose weight, but the scale just isn't budging. And I cannot underline this enough to like check your thyroid panel. Get as much blood work as your either insurance will cover or you can afford to cover. I mean, we just went and got some through our nurse practitioner, like 3-4 weeks ago, and I think it was like a total of like $480 for both of us, and that was like We got your comprehensive metabolic panel, your complete blood count, thyroid panel, lipid panel, sex hormone panels, some inflammation markers in there. I mean, so like it covered everything. And I'm glad we got it done because I can't remember if we've talked about it on the podcast or not, but like our vitamin D levels were like, whereas most people are deficient, like vitamin D is the biggest deficiency in like the Western world. Our vitamin D levels were actually like really, really, really high. They were creeping up there. One of the mentors that I was mentioning earlier actually said that when people's numbers get above 100, it's a problem. And I think we talked about this. Mine was a 92 and yours was a 98. So like if we didn't get that blood work, like we'd still be taking vitamin D because it's important for so much. But so after seeing that, it's like, oh, yep, we're nixing the vitamin D. So we've dropped that out for, a month to 2 months. And then we'll get it rechecked and we'll resume it. But like you've got to get blood work done because otherwise you have no idea what the hell's going on and you're just kind of like continuing to throw shit at the wall to see what sticks. But it's like it's the same thing when somebody asks me like what vitamins and minerals should I take, and the first thing I tell them is like, well, I would need to see like chronometer, like what track in chronometer, let me see what vitamins and minerals you're not getting through your diet or not already getting good quality ones through supplementation, and then we would fill those holes. It's the same thing with blood work. It's like you have no idea what's going on. You might have an inkling or a thought or a suggestion, but if you're not actually getting things measured, you're not going to know. So get a thyroid panel if you think any of these might be going on. And like I've mentioned, the things you want to get, it's more than just TSH. The doctor, if you go to like a PCP or a GP, they're going to just do TSH, most likely. I would get TSH. I would get free T4. I would get free T3. I would also get reverse T3. And then I would also get those two antibodies, the TPO, thyroid peroxidase, TPO antibody, and TG, the thyroglobulin antibodies. So get all of those, get that whole picture, really know what's going on. If your doctor, for whatever reason, is like just not cooperating with you or doesn't understand why it's important to get that full picture and they're not taking you serious because they just want to throw you on Synthroid and say like good luck, then you can order these yourself. You can get on like Quest Diagnostics, something like that. You can order these things yourself, and like there are a number of ways to do this, but you can I think you can order the labs and then go and have them drawn, or you can have the labs delivered to you. If you know somebody that's a phlebotomist, they can actually come over to your house and do the blood draw there, or you can take it to somewhere that would draw it for you. But again, it's critical because ultimately if you don't measure it, you can't manage it. And if you're not managing things, and you don't know what the hell's going on in your body, and again, you're just kind of like throwing shit at the wall and hoping for it to stick. So.
And speaking from experience, he's preaching the truth. Like, do not take your thyroid health lightly. Yeah,
or any factor of your health lightly, for that matter.
True.
So, yeah, with that, enough preaching. I'll get off the soapbox. As always, guys, thank you so much for listening. Like I said, next week we are back covering insulin and cortisol. If you have any questions on today's episode, if you want to know something deeper or need more clarity on something, more clarification on something, again, send your questions to NutrientPodcast@gmail.com or send us a message through Spotify. You can actually get on there, and I think you can even send us voice messages through Spotify, or you can submit questions through Spotify. There's all kinds of cool shit on there. So anyways, that is all we've got for episode 23, Health and Hormones on Your Thyroid. Thanks for listening.
We'll see you next week.
All right, guys. Bye. Have a good week.
Bye.